what hour your clock strikes here, it's always Halloween. And I'm always your haunted host, Luce Tomlin Brenner. Welcome to Small Frights Friday. On these very special episodes, I like to share a curated selection of calls from our All Hallows hotline and letters from our Eek mailbag. If you would like to share a Halloween query, a memory, or perhaps a recommendation with your fellow Luceo lanterns, then just give us a call any day or night. The graveyard's always open here. The number is 802-532-DEAD. And if you want to reach out with an Eek mail, then just send that over to It's Always Halloween Podcast at gmail.com. Don't forget that podcast part. It's Always Halloween at gmail.com belongs to someone else. And don't forget to tag me in any freaky frights you see on Instagram. Our handle there is It's Always Halloween Podcast as well. Now, before we dive in fully to today's episode, I want to thank the Patreon Ghoul Gang who makes every episode of It's Always Halloween possible. We actually have a handful of new ghouls to welcome today. Thank you so much for joining Julian E. Flores, Michael Suarez, Hannah Millette or Milletti, and Heather Cole. It's so wonderful to have you as brand new members of the Ghoul Gang, and you are directly contributing to this podcast getting made every week and keeping us independent, ad-free, and sustainable. We've got a number of fun things going on this month. If you want to join the Ghoul Gang and get a little extra Halloween into your May, our next bi-monthly movie party is this Saturday, May 14th at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we are doing a live in-person viewing party this month, inviting every single lantern in the SoCal area who wants to join us. Of course, it might be too late to get a plane ticket for this event, so if you're not nearby, never fear. When I say we, I mean Grimturn Nathan and I, are still tallying up all of your information that you've sent us, those of you who wish to be a part of the local Lantern Society and participate in events near where you live. And we hope to get out new local society numbers out this summer, right in time for the 100-day countdown when things really start ramping up. And you'll be able to have lanterns in your area that are into what we talk about here on this podcast and value community and inclusivity. And we are hoping to get those groups out very soon. But if you're a part of Local Lantern Society number 1, which is the SoCal Lanterns, then you are invited to this weekend's movie party at Grimturn Nathan's in the Valley here in the Los Angeles area. So that's open to all lanterns. However, if you are not in the SoCal area, we will be streaming as usual to the Patreon Ghoul Gang. So tune in for this next viewing of House or Hausu, the 1977 Japanese psychedelic horror film. It is horror, but it's also just very campy and fun, really wild effects. I wouldn't say it's scary. So if you are someone who enjoys more of spooky vibes and less like, terror, then this movie is for you. I do like to mix it up every month, so we're not just watching things that are way too terrifying for the average viewer. I myself am more on the gentler side of horror. So if you're thinking about wanting to join our bi-monthly movie parties, know that there is something for everyone. We're regularly taking suggestions and doing polls so that people can get their voices heard about what types of films they want to see. For each movie party, I kick things off with a little discussion of some pre-research I've done about the film and how it ties into the themes that we talk about on the podcast, and also just the history and making of the film. And then we watch the movie, and there's a little chat going the entire time so that lanterns from all over the world get to chat with each other and make jokes and distract a little bit from the scarier parts, or add trivia and their own knowledge. So we're constantly building on what we know about Halloween films and what we each bring to it. It's great. It's a fantastic experience. We'd love to have you here at the next one for House. And then just to pique your curiosity a little bit, don't forget, next month, June, is Pride Month, and It's Always Halloween is made by queer people. And so we are very excited to be celebrating next month with a whole slate of films and stories written either by queer people or having queer themes. But I don't want to jump ahead too much. Next Tuesday, Nathan and I will be jumping back on Instagram Live to do our third Kitchen Witch Live, and we'll be making bambrick bread, which is an Irish specialty around the Halloween times. So please join us for that. If you are at the Kitchen Witch level, which is $3 a month on our Patreon, then you'll get the recipe that's already been sent out. And if not, you can still just tune in and enjoy watching me flail around the kitchen like a poltergeist and Nathan whipping up something very beautiful and very well done. Then on Tuesday, May 31st, we have our next book club meeting, and we're reading Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And that book was recommended by Lantern and Ghoul Gang member Samantha McBride. So thank you so much for that, Samantha. So if you want to join the Ghoul Gang and help us produce more episodes of It's Always Halloween and get a little extra bit of Halloween every week, then you can go to patreon.com/It's Always Halloween to sign up. We have many levels, good for every budget: $1, $3, $6, $10, $13, and $16 a month. You get a wealth of different things. Plus, we've had this Patreon going for a little over a year now. So there's a back catalog of tons of stuff for you to rifle through and get your daily spills, thrills, and chills. Speaking of which, oh my God, it's Friday the 13th. What are you doing to celebrate today, Lanterns? Or are you staying home under the protective cover of a blanket and just watching the Friday 13th marathon between your little fingers? I, of course, am at Videotech today. I'm always at the video store on Fridays. Unfortunately, we cannot show rated R films because we have, all kinds of families coming in, people of all ages. So there's a little too many boobs and bloods in this movie. So I don't think I'll get to watch any of the Friday 13th films today, but I have been thinking a lot about Superstitions lately. Now, if you're interested in more of where the history of Friday the 13th came from, you have to check out the Small Frights Friday the 13th episode I did back in November of 2020. But today I did just want to touch on some more common superstitions and where those come from. As you know, I don't love the idea of just participating in traditions without knowing why I'm doing it. I've always been pretty stubborn and a little anti-authority. So I constantly am like, why? Why should I? Tell me why I should. And I made this podcast essentially because I was like, why do I like these things? Why is our culture obsessed with these images and these traditions? So there's a lot of superstitions that I think even if you are a more skeptical person, you may participate in, or at least you'll hear more often than not, like knock on wood or cross your fingers. Those are superstitious beliefs, yet a lot of times they don't seem quite as extreme as maybe looking out for ladders or not stepping on cracks or holding your breath when you drive past a cemetery. Now, I'm very curious to know if there are lanterns out there who feel superstitious, and if there's superstitions that you partake in, or maybe you don't like the word superstitions, but there's good luck charms you have perhaps. Please call into the hotline, write us a little email, and tell us all about it. Like our traditions, superstitions are rooted in our culture and ancient culture and can really say a lot about your background. So I think it's fascinating to kind of gather those from listeners around the world and see how our backgrounds shape our day-to-day lives and how a lot of times they make us closer to each other than far apart, even if, we are on other sides of the earth. So I found this fantastic Live Science article that I'm going to put in our show notes that breaks down some common superstitions that I myself have definitely partaken in. So one of them that I found really interesting was the superstition to not open your umbrella inside. Now, this is something that if somebody does it, I do have like a moment in my chest where I'm like, oh no. But it turns out there's a practical reason, and I'm sure you can guess it, because when I read it, I was like, yes, this makes sense. So the bad luck is very imminent in that what we think of as this tradition is probably rooted in Victorian England when umbrellas were big and metal, and they had that like metal spike on the end, and then the spokes were clanky metal. And so to open it inside was very hazardous. All the pokey parts could easily jab into the eye of a child or adult nearby, or knock a beautiful fragile item off of a mantelpiece. Scientist and author Charles Panetti writes, even a minor accident could provoke unpleasant words or a minor quarrel, themselves strokes of bad luck among family and friends. Thus, the superstition arose as a deterrent to opening an umbrella indoors. How perfect is that? It's really quite practical, this superstition. It's just asking you not to be a dumb sucker and leave that wet, pokey umbrella outside. Now, walking under a ladder perhaps has roots in Egyptian mythology, because a ladder, when it forms against a wall, looks like a triangle, and Egyptians regarded the triangle as sacred, which you can see by their pyramids. And to them, triangles represented the trinity of gods, and to pass through the triangle would be to desecrate them. Now, what's really fascinating is the way that this belief from 5,000 years ago wound its way through the ages and then became a superstition in Christianity related to Jesus Christ's death, because there was a ladder rested against the crucifix. And that made it become this symbol of betrayal and death and wickedness, and that walking under such a ladder would give you misfortune. And even more interesting is in England in the 1600s, criminals were forced to walk under a ladder on their way to the gallows, which is interesting because you're already going to be murdered. So I don't understand what the extra like a little kick in the pants is. Like, just so you know, you're having a bad day. Like, yeah, I'm about to get hanged. Okay, a little heavy-handed there, guys. As I said, a superstition that I participate in is knocking on wood when I say something that I don't want to happen. Like when I have a film shoot that's outside and everything is all set, and then someone says, oh, it looks like it's going to rain. And then I'm like, let's hope for good weather. It's not going to rain. Now, of course, like all superstitions, knocking on wood is just this way of saying, I have no control. The universe is wild and vast, and I am so small and can barely have any impact at all. And it's just like, I'm trying to get a hold of things that I maybe don't have any control over, essentially is where all superstitions come from. But knocking on wood might actually date all the way back to Celtic times, which makes it the perfect Halloween superstition. There's thoughts that it originated with the Celts, who believed in spirits and gods that resided in trees. And the thought was that knocking on tree trunks could rouse the spirits and call on their protection, or also just be like, knock, knock, thank you, I'm having good luck, and I'm really grateful to you, spirits, knock, knock. And then another thought was that if you're knocking on the tree trunk, it's to chase evil spirits away or prevent them from listening when you're boasting about your luck. So it's like, I'm doing great. Don't listen as I brag. La, 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 la. This is only for humans, not for spirits. I think it's so fascinating that so many of our superstitions date back to Roman and Celtic and Egyptian times, just like the Halloween traditions that we learn about on this podcast. So tell me about some of your superstitions. I would love to look them up and get a little more history on some of them. And I think it would be really fun to just dedicate an episode or two to digging deep into some of the history of these superstitions. Let me know what you think. So I'm going to post the articles in the show notes, history.com and Live Science, which have even more information than I dove into these last few minutes if you want to do a little more reading on your own. But for now, let's head on over to the Eek mailbag and see what's waiting for us. The subject line of our first letter is Salem Bucket List. Dear Luce and Luceo Lanterns, I had the pleasure of moving to the Boston area in 2020, and I am frighteningly excited about my close proximity to Salem. I went for a day trip to Salem last October, and it was so magical. I visited with my roommate and my boyfriend, and we squeezed a lot into our day. We ate lunch at the Mercy Tavern, dinner at the All Souls Lounge. We had a 2-hour walking tour of the city, and me in 3-inch heels, eek! We explored all the historical sites, we walked through the huge Halloween market on the Salem Common, and admired all the Halloween lovers in their witch hats and themed outfits. We even saw an adorable parade dedicated to dogs dressed up in Halloween costumes. Of course, I intend on returning to Salem again this year, hopefully for a longer period of time, and I wanted to ask if other Luceo Lanterns had suggestions for what we should put on our itinerary. There is so much I still want to do that we weren't able to get to last year, like some of the museums, but I figured no one would be able to give better recommendations than our community on the It's Always Halloween podcast. So, this is a request to other lanterns to write or call in with their Salem suggestions, spooky activities, must-see places, best spots to grab a bite, although I was admittedly disappointed by the lack of Halloween-themed restaurants. I guess Salem doesn't want everything to be about Halloween, but why? I hope that by the time peak Halloween season comes around, we'll have a great list of recommendations for everyone who plans on visiting which city in the future. In conclusion, you always brighten my day, Luce, and I really appreciate how intentional you are about being inclusive, how connected you make everyone feel, and how you keep it real when it comes to humanity's dark, in a bad way, history. Thank you for such a absolutely wonderful podcast. I missed the period last year when I discovered it and was binging it to catch up, but I am excited for what's to come in the future. Sincerely, Ghoul Gang member, Kendra. Oh, Kendra! And she attached this fantastic picture of her and her boyfriend in front of the House of Seven Gables, as made famous in Nathaniel Hawthorne's book of the same name. I loved this email. Thank you so much for reaching out, and thank you for becoming a Ghoul Gang member. As everyone knows, because I've talked about it a lot, but when I went to Salem, it was life-changing, and it's one of the few places I've ever visited that was as good as I had always imagined it would be. Los Angeles and Salem never have let me down. As growing up as a kid, just wishing I could see these places. You know, there's so many things that you get an idea about when you're younger and you haven't had a chance to travel as much. And a lot of them are still fun, but it's not quite the experience you had built up in your mind. But Salem really is not a letdown. And in my experience, neither is LA. So 2 places with lots of interesting, spooky history. But our focus right now, Salem, and your task, Lanterns, if you choose to accept it, is to write in and tell us about all of your favorite Salem activities. I'll start. So the first night we got into Salem, we stopped and had dinner at the Flying Saucer, which I picked because that was the name of a coffee house in my hometown where my friends and I hung out and played pool and smoked cigarettes underage and had coffee drinks that made us feel very grown up. So I was very excited that as soon as we got to Salem, the first place I saw was called the Flying Saucer. And I was like, this is great luck, of course. And they had really fun cocktails. One I remember was called the Basic Witch, which was vodka and pumpkin liqueur and Kahlua and Bailey's Irish cream. Had a ton of milk and dairy in it, so I didn't have it. But they also did one called the Tiny Witch Hat, which was the Basic Witch without the dairy, served as a shot, and that I did have, and it was fantastic. But their main focus was pizza, and they had vegan pizza, which was such a treat after our flight from LA to Boston and then the drive from Boston to Salem. We were just very excited to get some fun food in our system before we called it a night. I think we got there like around 10, so we didn't have a lot to do on our very first night. But right outside the Flying Saucer is the Bewitched statue, so of course I had to get a picture with Samantha. And this is all right downtown, so you can see the Salem Town Hall where they filmed the adult party scene in Hocus Pocus, and a ton of really cool old brick buildings, which are all just so gorgeous. There's so much eye candy in Salem. So many of my pictures are just pictures of houses and leaves and old buildings. I just couldn't get enough. I would love to stay there for just like a month and ogle everything aggressively. So Isaac and I also went to the House of Seven Gables, which we took a walking tour of and learned a lot about, which was very interesting. And then I accosted the man in the gift shop and started talking to him about history. And he was very learned and talked to me for like 30 minutes about different historical things around Salem. And we had a really great time. Loved the guy at the Seven Gables gift shop. Hopefully he's still there. Then across the parking lot was this very cute candy shop called Ye Old Pepper Company, which was started in 1806. And it's a little candy shop. And we grabbed a couple things there. It was very, very cute. It had like a Little House on the Prairie kind of vibe to it, which is also something I loved growing up. So lots of candy in barrels and big metal scoops. Very pleasing for me. Then we went to the Salem Witch Museum, which gave a pretty cursory history of the Salem witch trials. And not only do you get the history, but you're seated in this theater that shows all of these scenes that light up with like mannequins or wax figures. So it's both something you've heard before, but in a setting you've never been to, and it's like absolutely wild and sort of psychedelic. It kind of has like a 1960s museum vibe to it. But it's very grounded at the same time. I don't know, it's somewhere between like genuine scholarly history and camp is where the Salem Witch Museum resides. And that's a gorgeous building. I'm sure some of you are familiar with what the big sort of Gothic design of the windows, and it's in an old church, which is very apropos. And then we went to the Witch House, which is that famous black house that looks similar to the House of Seven Gables, but doesn't have 7 gables and has like, 4 maybe instead. Then we did a ghost tour, a walking tour at night, which I can't remember what the exact one was, but we were trying to go to one that was historical because I don't like to go to ghost tours that are more like silly because I'm trying to learn, of course. And we did one where we went to the burying point from 1637, the oldest burying ground in the city of Salem, and had some people from the witchcraft court, including Justice John Hawthorne. And finally, we went to Gallows Hill, which is not near downtown where all the regular stuff is. You have to kind of drive out. It's more in the suburbs. But I really recommend it. It's a really special spot. It's the memorial to the 25 people who were killed during the Salem witch trials, Proctor's Ledge, and it has each of their names on a stone. And it's just a really simple and evocative, beautiful memorial that you should definitely check out. We also stopped in a number of really cute little shops, of which I don't remember the names, but things changed. This was 4 years ago. We went on the way to the Axewound Film Festival in Brattleboro, Vermont, which is where my first horror comedy premiered. So this was a whirlwind, 42-hour trip. And I definitely would like to go there longer, like a week, or like I said, a month. Wouldn't a month be perfect? Maybe we need a It's Always Halloween sleepaway camp some fall where we all take a month off of work and we're also somehow rich in this scenario. We can do that. And then we all just gallivant around Salem. Isn't that perfect? What an incredible month that would be. Kendra, thanks so much for your lovely email. It took me back to such a perfect time, a few days in my life where I was just blissfully happy. And I would love to hear other lantern stories. So do as she says and call in and share your experiences as well. Now let's take a call from the All Hallows Hotline.
Hi, Lucy. This is Cheryl. I've written and I've called in before. I just have sort of a memory concerning Halloween in the late 2000s. And I just want to know, as anyone else roughly around my age, that's when they realized that the recession was really bad. And that's just the gravity of the recession of the 2008 stock market crash. So I don't know if anyone remembers, but prior to that, every year you would get sent catalogs from Spirit or Halloween or something like that. And I would always love it at that time of year, right around September. I would go through the catalog and circle what costumes I liked, what costumes I didn't. And I remember in 2009, every week I kept asking my mom, did the catalogs come in yet? Did the catalogs come in yet? And my mom sort of got more heartbroken as the weeks went by and no catalogs came. And I think at that point, that's when I realized that the company went out. And I think at that moment, that's when I realized just how bad the recession was. And I was roughly 13 around this time. So I just want to know, did this happen to anybody else? That was a weird memory. And that's a realization when you definitely saw a change in the Hollywood, the Halloween costume market companies and, what they stopped selling and definitely shrink. So I don't know if that made sense to anybody else, but that's a weird memory I had, and I just want to see if anyone else has this memory. So, well, it was great calling in again, and I'll see you soon.
Cheryl, what a fascinating observation. So I was not receiving Halloween catalogs at this time, but why not? What was going on? What was wrong with me? No, there was nothing wrong with me. I was graduating from college into the recession. Who else had that experience? What a rough time. So I guess I just wasn't in a ordering catalogs place in my life when I was 22, but I did love Halloween. And I got most of my Halloween decor at that point from Big Lots and the Goodwill and Salvation Army in town. And then also my mom, who sent me a lot of stuff from my childhood so that I could decorate my very first college apartment. So I did not notice if there was a downturn in Halloween businesses. So I took to the internet to do a little light sleuthing. And what I found was, first of all, you guys may have heard of this, but there's this fascinating survey run by the National Retail Federation that does an annual survey of U.S. consumers every fall, asking them about their plans for celebrating Halloween. And one of the main questions that they ask is how much in total consumers expect to spend on Halloween. Per person spending has mostly increased over the last several years. However, there was a big dip in Halloween 2009, which, as you know, coincides with the darkest part of the Great Recession. Now, I think you said that you noticed that you didn't get the catalog in 2008, which could be possible as well because the recession really started in 2006. We'll just do a quick little primer. This isn't spooky, but this might be helpful for those of you who aren't as familiar with what happened here in America in 2006. So the Great Recession started in 2006 with the subprime mortgage crisis, which is when banks invested in mortgages in the form of derivatives. And a derivative is a contract between two or more parties whose value is based on an agreed upon underlying financial asset, like commodities or precious metals or currency or bonds or stocks, etc. So when the housing bubble burst, the subprime borrowers started defaulting, and it made banks and hedge funds and insurance firms discover that they had worthless investments. And that led to the stock market crashing in 2008. And then in 2009, Congress passed multiple acts of enacted economic stimulus to prevent the recession from becoming a depression. That's just like very, very quick, barely tutorial of what happened. So in 2008, according to this national survey, it looks like there actually people weren't spending less money. Spending on Halloween in 2008 was actually up from 2007. And a lot of financial analysts say that when, the economy takes its first hit, people don't necessarily tighten their belts right away because they don't want to deal with it, which is very relatable. So it looks like people were still spending money in 2008 with kind of that carefree, I want to have a good time, everything else sucks, so Halloween, make me feel better, which I know is a idea that we can all relate to. But it was in 2009 that the market did dip a little bit. So spending dipped a little bit in 2009 from $66 a person to $56 a person, and total spending was down from $5.8 billion to $4.7 billion. But in 2010, it hopped right back up and has, for the most part, been just increasing ever since. In 2021, people spent $10.1 billion on Halloween alone, averaging about $103 a person, which is the very first time individual Halloween spending hit triple digits. So I don't know what to tell you, Cheryl, about the local place that you got your catalog from or the specific business where your goods came from. And I tried to do some research on companies that went out of business during that time, but it was really hard to find anything because you know who was soaring during that time? Spirit Halloween. And there's just article after article after article. I'm talking 6-7 pages deep in Google about how Spirit was crushing during the recession and nobody could understand it. So maybe it was the recession that put your beloved cataloger out of business, or maybe it was Spirit Halloween. In the years since the recession, two trends actually have happened. One is that Halloween stores have become a lot more common around the country. And two, these stores are taking up larger and larger spaces. Spirit Halloween started in 1983 with one store. Then by 1999, it had about 60 stores. That's when it was bought by Spencer's Gifts and franchised out the wazoo. By the time the recession hit, it had 1,000 stores, and just last year, it had 1,400 stores. So nothing's slowing them down. Now, if your eyes are glazing over like apple cider donuts, don't look at the road. My God, you're driving. And listen, I get it. Numbers are not cozy or fun or autumnal at all, so we won't go into it for very long. But all that to say, there's really no other way to track whether or not the financial crisis in America affected Halloween sales, except for a bunch of numbers with charts. So I'm going to put those charts in the show notes so you can look at them yourself. We don't have to do too much math on this podcast. This is an anti-math podcast, pro-history, anti-math. That being said, I am just going to throw a couple more numbers your way because I did think that this was interesting. So for comparison's sake, think about Spirit at 1,400 locations. Then we have Michael's, which is a craft store that's open all year round, but they do a ton of Halloween business. Starting, I think, in July, they were putting stuff out on the shelves last year. I know a lot of you, including me, do enjoy picking out fun Halloween stuff at Michael's. Well, they have 1,200 stores, so 200 less than Spirit. And then another store, like let's take a general interest kind of department store like Macy's, they put some Halloween stuff out, but it's not nearly what like Michael's or Joann's does. They currently have 508 locations around the country. Now, unlike Macy's, Spirit has increased its retail presence, obviously. And the only other store that actually does seem to be building more stores and doing even better is Target, who had 1,900 stores as of January of this year. And they do incredible Halloween business as well. So Target really seems to be one of the largest competitors for Spirit Halloween. And with that said, those are two giant national corporations. So I think a lot of, more local party shops, mom and pop shops, local artists definitely are always competing against these large chains and have probably felt the economic peaks and valleys a lot harder than Spirit Halloween or Target has. So if you know more about this, the economic recession, how it affected Halloween businesses, if you had a Halloween business that was affected, let us know by keeping in mind that we are anti-math. And listen, this is not an anti-intellectual standpoint. This is me having a grudge at failing math in high school. So math has been an enemy of mine for a long time, and it was mad at me first. I did not start it. I wanted to do well in math. This is math's problem, and math has to solve it. I'm in over my head right now. All right, let's go over to the email bag and pick out another letter. This one has the subject line, witches. Hello, Luce and all the Luceo lanterns. I found the podcast last September, and I absolutely love it. It's just the right amount of spooky fun. You've asked at times how people keep the Halloween spirit going year-round, so I wanted to contribute what I do. I find the history of witches fascinating. I also love the way witchcraft has evolved today, and how strong, intelligent, mindful people use their own power and the Earth's resources to heal and understand life. So, I have witches up in my house all year round, including a cauldron I keep out that always has candy in it. You can trick or treat at my house anytime. I'll attach a couple pictures for reference. Also, my living room is done in all fall colors, so it's super cozy feeling no matter what time of year it is. I can't wait to hear more episodes, and now, since I joined the Patreon, I'm going to join in on all the fun extras. So happy I found this podcast. Thanks for helping keep the Halloween spirit going year-round. Heather. Oh, Heather, what a sweet email. Thank you so much for this and for joining the Ghoul Gang on Patreon. We gave you a little shout out at the top of the episode, I believe. You and I feel so similarly about witches, and I also have several witch pictures and illustrations up on my wall and a few different witch signs, and I have a witch tattoo as well that I got with a friend of mine many years ago. And I've always been inspired by the witch as imagery because it really just stands for strong, independent, educated women who knew how to take care of their communities and were in turn punished for that knowledge. And I think that we see that kind of thing happen today. So the image of the witch is an evergreen icon, which is why I have been working for a year now on getting these chapters about witches, which will be coming out very soon. I know I've been saying that for a while, but this summer is the summer, and I can't wait because I know how many of you are clamoring for more things about witches, but my goodness, there's a lot out there. I'm curious, Heather, if you have ever been to Salem as a lover of the witch. I'm absolutely obsessed with these pictures that you sent. It looks like you have a almost human-sized witch in your house, maybe like child-sized witch that's holding a trick-or-treat bucket with candy. And do I spy Reese's peanut butter cups, or is that just what I want to see? Because if you kept peanut butter cups out all year round, my goodness, how indulgent. I absolutely love it. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your home and your Halloween spirit with us, Heather. I know you're going to love the upcoming chapter on witches, and I look forward to having you in the Ghoul Gang. Make sure you check out all of our tags. There's a number of things I've written about and shared about witches on the Patreon blog, so I hope you enjoy your time with us over there. Now, before we sign off, I just want to remind all you glowing lanterns out there in Halloween land, please send in your recipes and your trick-or-treat photos for our new zines that we're collaborating with Displaced Snail on this year. I'm so thrilled. Every day I get such cool submissions from you guys, and I'm sending them over to Joseph Carlo over at Displaced Snail. If you haven't listened to our Hallowzines episode yet to learn a little bit more about what he does, go check it out. That was a few episodes back in March. He's an incredibly passionate DIY artist, a queer Halloween lover, just like so many of us. And I know you're going to be thrilled when you see how these zines are coming together. We hope to have them available in August for pre-order. Then you'd be able to receive them in September. So we do need to get all the submissions by June 1st to finish our layout and kind of go back and forth and make sure we have all of the little details finished by the end of July. So if you want to be a part of this project that brings the entire lantern community together, please send your information in. I think this is going to be a really special keepsake, something that you can enjoy all year round, or just bring out during calendar Halloween and share with all the people that love Halloween as much as you do. So send those trick-or-treat photos and your favorite recipes to It's Always Halloween Podcast at gmail.com by June 1st. And make sure to tell us a little bit about what you're sending and why it's important to you and how much information you want to be included. First name, last name, just initials, social media handles, your region. Share as much or as little as you like. And I am excited to participate in all of this with you guys. Thank you for turning this podcast into more than a podcast. I've said it before and I'll say it again. This was not what I was anticipating when I started this project solely for myself back in August of 2020. And it has grown way beyond anything that I could imagine. And it has turned into more than I thought a podcast could. So as we've kind of been shifting and growing and changing, I'm trying to find my footing as well. You know, my background is in comedy and entertainment, and now we're kind of starting a little bit of a business together. And this is new for me. So I'm doing a lot of learning. And so there's a few hiccups here and there. And I thank you so much for just coming up alongside of me, grabbing the little knife and figuring out how to jam it into the pumpkin. Did you think I was going to say something else? Those little bendy knives, carving a jack-o'-lantern with those drugstore knives. That's what I feel like growing this podcast has been. Like, it's fun and you're having like a good time and a special experience, but it's also a little confusing and you don't know if you're doing it right and if it's going to be something people like when you're done. But you guys have just been such a treat the entire time. The Reese's peanut butter cups in my everyday life. I'm so grateful for you. And I'm so psyched about calendar Halloween 2022. There's some really cool stuff coming up that I can't quite announce yet, but is very big. And I'm just thrilled. So thanks for jumping on this haunted hayride with me. It is a blast. If you love It's Always Halloween, like I said at the top of the episode, you can sign up for our Patreon at patreon.com/It's Always Halloween for even more tricks and treats all month long. Or you can leave a tip in our tip jar, $30, and you get to sponsor an episode all to yourself. Both are linked in our show notes along with our Redbubble store and our Instagram. This episode of It's Always Halloween was written and performed by me, Luce Tomlin Brenner, with help from our incredible Luceo Lanterns, Kendra, Cheryl, and Heather. Thank you so much for your contributions. We could not have made this episode without you. The editing, theme music, and sound design is by the wonderful Pete Burns. Thanks, Pete. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at LTB Comedy and Pete at Mittenberries. If you're on Apple Podcasts, just take a minute to write a couple sentences about what you love about It's Always Halloween. Your ratings and reviews help like-minded ghouls find us. And if you're on the NPR One app, don't forget to tell Ira Glass that you love us. Thank you so much for listening to yet another episode of It's Always Halloween. And come back next time, unless you're too busy in the grips of math. No.